All right, so we're going to start our second panel, and this one is Consumer Effects of the CLCPA, Costs, Benefits, and Impacts. We have Michael Butler from he's the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director for Consumers Energy Alliance, John Howard, Commissioner of New York State Public Service Commission. Unfortunately, Richard Berkeley from the Public Utilities Legal Project emailed me very late last night, said a conflict came up, he could not redeploy his staff. And so he sends his apologies to everybody who came here. But we'll work with what we got, and I'm sure we'll do fine. So, again, 5 minutes for each gentleman to start, and we'll begin with Mr. Butler.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the Empire Center for having me today. My name is Michael Butler. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Executive Director for the Consumer Energy Alliance. Just quickly, for those who may not be familiar with us, though I do appreciate the plug our study got earlier. We're founded in 2008. We're a non-profit, nonpartisan consumer energy advocacy organization. We have over 300 corporate members nationally, over 500,000 grassroots members nationally. You can find out more about us at our website, consumerenergyalliance.org. And if you're to distill us down to just a bumper sticker, we look at all of our energy issues through the prism of affordability and reliability, and that's really what has us very concerned about the legislation that we find here in New York, the CLCPA. It's just very difficult to see how this legislation won't have significant consumer costs, exorbitant consumer costs. We've heard them today in different examples: $35,000 for existing homeowners to retrofit homes, tens of thousands of dollars to build new homes moving forward. And we see this type of legislation throughout the country. I mean, New York is this particular legislation is very aggressive. But your neighbors in New Jersey have the Energy Master Plan. They basically outsource that to the Rocky Mountain Institute. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They don't have any heating or cooling in their offices in Colorado. They have $7,000 heated chairs, so that's who New Jersey thought should be writing their Energy Master Plan. You can only imagine some of the details of that plan. New England, has this aggressive push for these environmental standards. So far, so dramatically so that a few years ago they had to import Russian natural gas to get through a winter. Of totally foreseeable consequences when you block pipelines out of Pennsylvania and the Marcellus Shale region, California. 30% higher costs than the national average, reliability issues, and for some reason New York wants to replicate what all these other states have tried and had these consequences. What's unfortunate is that New York has a great energy story to tell. From 1990 to 2020, that 30-year period, New York reduced its emissions by 95%. During that same 30-year window, natural gas and oil made up 78% of the energy mix. So it just shows, one, how important natural gas is to reducing emissions and meeting our climate goals. Secondly, it shows the incredible technological progress the industry has made. And it does show, of course, renewables are growing and will continue to be an important part of the mix. But with that incredible energy story, or environmental story, you also have this incredible consumer story. In a recent 10-year period, 2008 to 2018, we found, and you can find this report, both these reports on our website, that New Yorkers have saved over $31 billion by increased use of natural gas in that 10-year period. It works out to over $1,200 per resident of New York. So just incredible savings have been earned by taking advantage of this natural gas revolution, and it's really crazy to roll that back. Now you're going to undo those savings that have been accrued. As James alluded to in his opening remarks, you could have maybe a net negative cost of $300 billion of implementing this legislation. When you're making so much progress on people's pocketbooks, it just seems misguided. Again, especially during an era where you're having this incredible environmental progress, it seems unnecessary and just really playing politics, ideological politics, as opposed to getting down to more sensible policies that can really make a difference. And that's the other thing that's very frustrating. And as other speakers have talked about, New York's global footprint in the emissions front just is not that significant. There was a study that over 50% of the world's emissions come from 25 cities. One's Tokyo, one's Moscow, one's Istanbul, the other 22 are in China. Again, as James alluded to earlier, India and Africa will be coming online in more significant ways in the years to come. So for New Yorkers to bear these costs that they'll face, the jobs that'll be lost, those missed opportunities, when you're not really going to make any global dent in the environmental progress we're all aspiring to make, again, just seems like it's ideological politics over practical policy, and there just isn't any need for it. Again, New York's making great strides. The United States is making great strides. We like to call it the greatest story that's never been told. The incredible progress the United States has made. We are the only country that is a signatory to the Paris Accord that is on a trajectory to meet those standards, and that is largely because of natural gas, increased renewables, and technological advancements, and more coming. Again, as we talked about earlier, carbon capture, hydrogen, renewable natural gas. Unfortunately, none of that's really baked into the CLCPA. But those are the types of things that are on the forefront that will continue to ensure that New York and the United States meets these standards. And again, at the moment, we're the only nation really doing that. And this, again, just seems like a totally misguided approach to address a problem that is better suited through the markets, the industry, and technology. And we'll just make one other note on some of those costs. Again, particularly when it relates to housing. This country, and New York State is not unique to this, has just incredible, severe shortage of affordable housing. I just don't understand how it's conscionable to add tens of thousands of dollars to construction of new homes, tens of thousands of dollars to retrofitting of old homes, when we have this incredible gap for affordable housing. I just, again, I don't want to, just keep bashing away on one political side, but I don't know if some of the economic justice advocates really appreciate what the environmental justice advocates, the ramifications of what they're pushing. There'll be severe consequences of a lot of these actions for, again, the communities of people who are least well positioned to handle it. Over 40% of Americans could not meet a $1,000 one-time emergency. Not only do they not have those resources, they would not know who to turn to get through that. And so when you have any policy that increase energy costs, we have to be very conscientious that there are a lot of our neighbors that just can't absorb those. And though there are programs and subsidies out there, they don't go far enough. They're not accessible enough. And there's no way to dodge your utility bill, your gas bill, filling up your tank in your car. And it's just, I just don't know if we fully, though the aims are good, the ambition is good to have a more environmentally sustainable future, but the way we're going about it, I think, is doing more harm than good. But again, appreciate the opportunity to be here today and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. First of all, I recognize my colleague, Diane Berman, and my colleagues in other government, our two assembly members here. I think I have a unique role here on this panel. I'm the only guy who gets to put my hand in your pocket to pay for stuff, except for the two gentlemen over there. Their process a little more formalized, and I use this phrase: when the government takes money from you that you wouldn't normally give them, what do we call that? I said this to staff early on in my time at the commission, and they said, well, but a fee. I said, it's not a fee. It's a tax. And because of the way we have done the CLCPA compliance to date, I'm the tax raiser. I'm the one who pays. I'm the one who decides. Not me as solo. I'm one of 7. But again, we're the ones who decide. Now, what are the things that we have already put our hands in your pockets to pay for? Again, all related to getting to our CLCPA compliance goals. The RECs, the large cost for renewable energy that goes into our bill automatically. Along with those RECs now is RECs to buy electricity from Canada and transport other energy directly into New York City. Again, we pay for that. ZECs. ZECs are the money that we give to our nuclear operators so they can stay in business. It's great that the Congress, in their wisdom, appropriated $6 billion over a 5-year period to keep nukes going across the country. We're paying $7.5 billion over 10 years to keep our nukes So again, we've already paid. We have not seen any money from the feds. We also do the OREX, which we approve the offshore wind purchases. We also we're responsible for paying for the transmission. People, and I think Gavin mentioned transmission. I don't think we talk about transmission enough, not only because it's difficult to do, but it's very expensive. And there's a good possibility that the capital costs, say, for offshore wind integration can be roughly equivalent. The transmission and distribution cost to get that is from the actual cost to put the turbines in the ocean. So it's another thing that we do. Plus, we do a variety of other clean energy fund stuff. Folks had mentioned the various programs to pay for heat pumps and the like. Again, that generally comes from assessment on your utility bills to pay for them. You know, I just wanted to say one thing about, I don't know, everybody else has been somewhat jaundiced on the CLCPA's goals. I do believe that climate change is our existential threat of our generation. Is it, and it will need to be done on a global basis, certainly on a national basis. So, but again, the underlying concept that we need to decarbonize and clean up our environment is absolutely the case. And particularly was also mentioned that there are real local pollution issues dealing with fossil generation, particularly in downstate New York. We have a very congested population who live very close to large emitters. And they have real demonstrable negative health effects, particularly on NOx and SOx and particulate pollution, that are real and demonstrably real in studies to say that we clean them up, we make people healthier. But the task at hand has been described as basically the recapitalization of our entire energy system in 18 years. Nobody's ever done that before, not even come close. And to the issues of the cost, $200-300 billion, the legislature just did our one-year spending plan of $220 billion. So it's like more than we would do in a whole year's worth of spending in New York State. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And so far, the only mechanism by which we have to pay for it is through our utility bills and the like. I noticed with great attention that the legislature, in their wisdom this year, understood that energy affordability is a big problem. People are hurting. They can't afford their motor fuel. So we do a massive, nearly $600 million tax cut for motor fuel. So obviously we know that folks can't afford their energy bills when it comes to transportation. But that is all you guys did. You didn't do anything on other issues of your electric bill or your natural gas bill. And again, we're still waiting. But as been pointed out, the big bugaboo in the entire thing is not, and I believe it's technical feasibility, which we could debate that in terms of when actually things will get done, but it's how we capitalize things. And until we take it seriously across New York, and I think across the United States, we will run into this brick wall where the affordability issue will eclipse the issues regarding climate, and the whole process could come to a grinding halt. And I think that'd be a terrible situation.
Thank you, gentlemen. I don't know about you all, but that all sounded rather depressing. But I'm not sure that any of it's wrong. Part of the cost issue, it seems to me, is the complexity of it. There are multiple parts of it and multiple ways of potentially paying for these things. You mentioned, Commissioner Howard, that so far it's all probably going to be going through ratepayers. But I would also add that a fair amount will probably be going through homeowners and the need to retrofit their homes for electrical. How do you see, and of course the The Climate Action Council has not really addressed that. A couple of members of it asked the council to address these issues and have a study done about how the costs would be distributed, and the co-chairs of the council declined to have that done. And the state legislature, despite a record-breaking budget, has dedicated surprisingly little to the goals of the CLCPA. How do you see the future playing out as far as trying to pay for all this?
Just up to me.
Either one of you or both.
Well, first of all, Gavin spoke quite eloquently and has had for years on the issue of a carbon tax for all intents and purposes, putting a value on carbon that we produce. That's great, except the other 49 states that aren't going to do it. So we already are in an economic disadvantage. It's expensive to live in New York State. It's expensive to do business in New York State. Our housing costs, particularly downstate, are astronomical. As you said, and housing affordability is very difficult. But so the issue becomes, whatever we do, we need to be very cognizant of what it does to our position in terms of economic competitiveness. I'll give a good example. We are $200 million, I believe, was in the budget for solicitation of large microelectronic manufacturers, chip fabs, like we have in Malta. Well, what is very curious to me is that these chip fabs are going to be enormously energy intensive, enormously, hundreds of megawatts, and tens of thousands of decatherms of gas. They will not be built anywhere in the United States where they can't afford to do business. So that's one of two ways we do it. Either we subsidize them or we don't get them. So again, at some point, as part of the energy affordability thing, even the issues of taxation that the CEI, whatever it's called, the issue becomes a polluter pays tax. Well, we pay that. I mean, we are the polluters. When I buy a gallon of gas or a decatherm of natural gas or a gallon of heating oil or a pound of propane, I'm a polluter. So I will be paying that. If I make widgets, I'll be paying a lot more because I use a lot more. So at some point, the widget manufacturer goes the way of all flesh and leaves town. And I particularly, we have this discussion with the assemblyman. There are communities, and particularly ones that he represents in the western southern tier, that we are so dependent on a single large employer. They leave town, the town goes away. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of examples in upstate New York in particular where that has happened. And we don't have much farther to go in terms of population loss and economic activity that supports families, particularly in some of our smaller communities. So the issue becomes, yes, we need to pay for it through some sort of tax, but what tax do we levy that is fair and does not kill us economically?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up perfectly. It's either taxpayers pay more or job creation dries up. It's a terrible, talk about being between a rock and a hard place. There are no easy answers. If you have a climate initiative that is this ambitious on such short timelines, which the first panel really talked about, in great depth. With the legislation as it is, you don't have a whole lot of easy solutions. I wish I had some better news, but it just looks like you're headed down a path for just exorbitant costs, and I think those costs are ultimately going to lead to a job flow out of the state of New York. I live in Pennsylvania, so I might personally benefit a little bit, but I feel bad for you guys.
Yes, Michael, I was going to ask you. You're the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director for the Consumers Energy Alliance, and so John is worried about jobs flowing out of states. Can you tell us what states are included in the Mid-Atlantic, and how does New York compare to them in terms of what's going on here in terms of dealing with these issues, and what do you think the likely differential effects are in the Mid-Atlantic versus New York?
Well, I should mention I do have a colleague who couldn't be here. She's based here in Albany. Wendy Hio, she had a personal circumstance and so is not here. Some of you may know her. But I cover Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and then so we have regional chapters throughout the country, headquartered in Houston, and then we have 9 regional chapters. I live in Pittsburgh. I mean, the only good news for New York is that, again, New Jersey and New England are pretty much going down as bad a path as you are. So in that case, you're very similar to your neighbors. The other challenge, though, is you're just becoming far more costly than your neighbors to the south, even Pennsylvania and Ohio, let alone the southeastern part of the United States. And it doesn't need to be that way. I mean, Pennsylvania is actually on the cusp of, and I guess technically has joined, though I think the courts are going to jam it up, has joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It'll be the first significant energy-producing state to join RGGI, and that is a way to try to harmonize carbon costs and carbon taxes. Again, that could level the playing field with New York, with its immediate neighbors, but the economic mobility, not counting New York City, but the economic mobility of the country is really headed south, where costs across the board are less expensive. And, I know in Pennsylvania for a while, at the front end of the natural gas boom, we saw a real resurgence of jobs. Washington County, which is a county just southwest of Pittsburgh, for a while was the fastest growing county in the country. And this was, parts of the country that were just decimated when the steel industry collapsed in the 1970s and 80s. I mean, Pittsburgh in 1983 had 28% unemployment, and that's how significant the loss of the steel industry was. And we really had nothing to replace that until the natural gas industry came along. And that's really kind of been stymied, one, because of policies within Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania could never consume all the natural gas it produces. And so we should have pipelines out of Pennsylvania throughout New York, New Jersey, into New England, and they're just being blocked everywhere. And those would significantly, the most notable one, the Penny's pipeline, was just even the fact that they went to the U.S. Supreme Court. You got bogged down in such opposition and litigation that project was canceled. But that would be a great opportunity. It'd be one, there'd be a lot of union jobs for New Yorkers to build those pipelines, and secondly, it would continue to drive down those costs, which I talked about earlier. The $31 billion New Yorkers have already saved during a 10-year period. That ought to be the trajectory that both New York should be on and the region should be on, and that natural gas pipeline infrastructure would help reduce the emissions, your goals that you have. But it gets to a point earlier, building out your electrification system, the grid, increasing that capacity 3 times or 4 times. I don't know at the time that would be in the best of circumstances, but it is excruciatingly difficult to get projects built. And you will find, even though it's supposed to support this climate goal, you will find opposition at every turn to get those projects through. We just had, just a few weeks ago, the Sunrise Movement come out against a solar project in New Hampshire. I just don't see how there's any way to, in the best of circumstances, meet these timelines, and there's really no reason to think, as we see across the country, the obstacles and barriers and opposition groups that will come out, it just seems, again, to me, wholly impractical. So long way of saying in New York, compared to its immediate neighbors is probably okay, but I think a real missed opportunity because I think the rest of the country has a lot of significant advantages.
John, as a PUC commissioner, can you explain the role that ratepayers have in hearings for setting rates and ratepayer cases, and how you think that might play out as these cases begin to come forward?
As I pointed out in our last commission meeting, we have sort of 2 tracks on how we handle petitions and cases. One is the fully litigated case, which are most rate cases, which are where we do figure out the delivery rate and the cost for the local utilities. And then we have the other petitions, for instance, on almost all of the climate-related petitions that come to us as an up or down. In the case of what we just did at Tier 4 was just a up or down, yes or no, as opposed to other petitions like the OREX, which we give seed authority to NYSERDA to enter into those contracts with a guarantee that we will put them into rates. Because there's 2 parts of your bill. your delivery bill, which everybody talks about. We had just concluded with Niagara Mohawk and Central Hudson, some very large, long litigated cases, which I think are very well represented across the board with customers. Is it hard? Is it taciturn? Yes, but I think it is a viable process. That same level of public discourse does not exist, in my mind, for some of these other petitions dealing with the large renewable projects, which do not go into your delivery rate. They just go into your bill on the supply side. So again, that is an automatic. Also, I'm also increasingly troubled, this is a personal opinion, on how we do with just market-based bidding. We know with great precision, literally to the pennies in some cases, what the various components of the input cost are for our delivery customers, companies. How much they pay the labor, what their return on investment, what their cost of debt is. Those are all discussed and negotiated in the settlement proceeding and before it gets to us. For instance, I have no idea what an OREX or return on equity is. I have no idea. We know what the bid price is, and we're making the assumption that the bid price represents a reasonable cost to ratepayers. Again, we have a reputation, and I think well-earned, and I'm proud of it, a very stingy commission. And we have some of the lowest return on equity rates in the country. People don't believe that, but it's true. We are very stingy when it comes to ratepayers' money in these rate cases. I don't know on the OREX or the other various RECs or other adders whether we get that same level of economic efficiency. It is unclear. I know that the process is not particularly well done. And I see Rick Carling from the Times Union here. And one of the things, and this got to from the previous plan, why doesn't anybody know? I think one of the reasons nobody knows about these various impacts, because I don't think anybody's written about them in great detail. For instance, we have just done the Tier 4 petitions from which upstate into Canada, that we all celebrated with great things about the environmental benefits that they were all going to accrue. But nobody wrote, very few people wrote how much it actually costs. And that while the benefits are going to be extreme and really measurable for New York City, 60% of the cost is going to be paid for by people outside of New York City. So your aunt in Tonawanda is going to be paying to help clean up your cousin in Queens' air. They don't know that. And more importantly, the folks in Tonawanda, where they work, if they work in the amalgamated widgets in Tonawanda, their bills for their employer could go up 15 to 20% just for this one initiative. Nobody wrote that. I'm a faithful reader of the upstate newspapers, and I did not see this anywhere, particularly that we were going to do in one single action, potentially raise industrial commercial rates by in excess of 15%. That just didn't get written about. And it's very hard for people to react about something they don't know about. But we do celebrate the investment. There is no doubt, because we all call them investments. And as Gavin pointed out, and others have pointed out, the benefits will always be better than the investment. They always will. I guarantee you that will always be the case. But again, I and my colleagues are the ones who have to say, I got the benefit, but I have to make the judgment whether it's just and reasonable for me to put my hand in your pocket through your energy bill to pay for something. And again, would it were that the debate was broader. Let's put that.